Matthew first began sharing his enthusiasm for weather at the age of 14. Since then, he has become a regular contributor to the Washington Post, the MyRadar weather app, NPR, numerous international news organizations, and is now part of the weather team at DC's Fox 5 television channel. I started following Matthew on Twitter last year during his May 2021 storm chase, which many of the pictures from that chase are in this book. I enjoyed his excited explanations of inflow versus outflow, supercells, mammatus clouds, and jaw-dropping videos and photo captures of tornadoes. Matthew is also a frequent topic of conversation in my house, as in, "Mom, I hear thunder. What is Matcap saying?" Yeah, side note, we refer to him as Matcap in my house. So, sorry. Okay. I can always count on him to let us know what's coming when the skies look stormy. Needless to say that I'm very happy to have him here for the launch of his first book. I'm looking forward to hearing in person about his adventures, as I'm sure you all are. So please welcome Matthew Cappucci.
Hi, everyone. How are you? So I'll apologize in advance. I've been awake since 1 o'clock in the morning, so if ever I'm a little bit less composed than normal, and we know my baseline to begin with, then that kind of explains what's going on. But anywho, I appreciate you guys coming out so much. It really does mean a lot. I have a very unusual job in that I have 4 or 5 different jobs. I work on radio, TV, newspapers. I work for an app. I storm chase on the side. In my spare time, or what little spare time, I apparently write books, and I work as an educational consultant for a company up in Boston, so it keeps me pretty busy. But first, we'll talk a little bit about me, kind of my background, and then we'll shift into a couple fun little passages in the book, and it's really a testament to all my fun adventures. So I wanted to be a meteorologist since I was probably 3 or 4 years old. When I was around that age, just after I learned to talk, I was obsessed with the anemometer spinning on people's roofs. And you know those little wind meters? For whatever reason, it was always that, and then there was like the methane pipes they have, you know, like the little things that come out of the ground like this. I don't know why. I was an eclectic kid, and now I'm a quirky adult. But no, I always loved those things. And I was always so fascinated by what they were, what they did, especially the wind meters. And when I was about 5 or 6, I watched my first documentary on tornadoes, and I was hooked. I learned about tornadoes and waterspouts. And I grew up on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where we don't really have tornadoes or waterspouts or anything of that nature. And so I was always thirsting for severe weather, and it never really happened. When I was 7, I saved my first communion money to buy a video camera so I could storm chase, which I found the video footage the other day. It falls tragically short of National Geographic quality. But in any case, I'd literally ride my metal bicycle around the neighborhood during thunderstorms with a little walkie-talkie so I could keep in contact with my folks and point at the sky all shaky, and I'd zoom in. This was back when you had the big bulky camcorders, cost like $200. And it was funny. When I was that age, I always itemized my expenses, so I had an actual cash register. I had a receipt printer, so little 5, 6-year-old me could keep track of my finances. And it worked somehow. Not that I had much in the way of finances. I used to sell golf balls through a fence near I was in the not fancy part of the golf course, like the normal side, and then there's a golf course, and there's the big fence that keeps us out. But the golfers would hit their golf balls over. I'd sell them back after I washed them, and that's how I got my money for a video camera. But yeah, I always wanted to storm chase. However, when you're a 7, 8-year-old on Cape Cod, when everyone else at school is trading Yu-Gi-Oh cards or doing whatever else the kids do, and your face is buried in a textbook, you don't really fit in all that much. And same thing in middle school. Everyone else is, driving the teachers crazy or doing whatever, and I'm probably closer friends with the teachers than I am with the kids my own age. And that's just kind of how middle school went. And that really is sort of how it was. I memorized a periodic table just for fun, and everyone else is downloading Snapchat and whatever else the kids do these days. They all had smartphones. I got my first phone actually when I was in 9th grade, and it was one of those flip phones with like letter keys. I thought it was the pinnacle of technology because it had letters on it. And I used to think that text messages were like emails, so I'd start texting my friends, "Dear Joey and Cooper, I'm writing to see if..." So that's how that went. But anyway, when I was in my 8th grade year, I was trying to figure out how I could get more involved with weather in general. And my mother, being the saint that she is, found online a weather camp, which is a real thing. It is exactly what it sounds like. And it happened to be at Howard University here in Washington, D.C. And so naturally I applied. I put all the papers together, wrote a couple essays, put it off in a big manila envelope and sent it out in the mail, hoping that eventually we'd get good news. And indeed we did. They had 65 applicants, 12 folks were selected, and it was kind of all expenses covered, other than getting down there and getting back. So I had the bright idea of, this was July of 2012? Yeah, July of 2012, right after the derecho. I missed the derecho. But I had the bright idea of taking the megabus. By a show of hands, has anyone ever ridden the megabus? It's like Spirit Airlines of the ground. Give or take a couple tires. Yeah. And so my mother, again the saint, accompanied me down to D.C., and we took the megabus from Boston. It was the most interesting public transportation experience I've ever had. At one point, we actually had a rest area where we stopped at, and we got like 20 miles down the road when we realized we left like 5 passengers at the rest stop. We had to turn around, go back. Then at one point, the woman in front of me fell asleep, and the couple next to me saw that she had these fancy Maui Jim sunglasses, reached over, grabbed them from her like visor type thing, and took them. And then she woke up, naturally turned around, thought I did it, and started screaming at me. But the only challenge was that I didn't speak Mandarin, so it was very challenging. But in any case, I don't recommend taking the megabus. I had a thermometer with me, and it got to 109.2 in there in Philadelphia due to the heat wave that also had brewed the derecho days earlier. So anywho, it came down to weather camp, and it was a sort of transformative experience because for the first time, I was with other people who shared my same passion. Odds are, if you're growing up in middle school, high school, and you love weather the way I always did, you're probably unique in that passion. You're not really at the lunch table talking about geostrophy and stratus clouds and convection and all this stuff. So it was nice to sort of be within my element, surrounded by other people who loved what I did. However, I quickly realized that even among the nerds, I was the nerdiest, which was a humbling experience. But by virtue of that, it almost made me like the prom king of the group, because anytime we'd get severe weather during those 2 weeks here in D.C., everyone would flock to my dorm. They'd want to hear my take on it, and the data, and what were we looking at, what were the lapse rates, and all this stuff, and was there an outflow boundary? It was the best. And I thought, I have to major in meteorology or atmospheric sciences or anything in college because I could have this sort of camaraderie all the time, which would be such a blessing. And so while I was at that conference, weather camp, I fell in love with DC, and I kept the same Metro card, and I said, I have to live in DC someday. And sure enough, it worked out. Still have that same Metro card. There's still $2 on it. But no, it worked out really well. So I go back to high school, finish up my final 3 years there, and right after I got back from this weather camp in D.C., I found out that the American Meteorological Society was having a conference for broadcast meteorologists in Boston. And the leader of weather camp kind of hooked me up with the AMS, and lo and behold, I wound up there, and it was great. And initially, no one would talk to me because there's this 13, 14-year-old kid there in a room full of folks who are professional broadcast meteorologists, like 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and what's this 14-year-old doing? And it was nice because they eventually invited me up to the podium to talk a little bit, and then I became like the mascot. So the next year, 2013, I wound up putting together a presentation on my thoughts on outflow boundary-related waterspouts. Essentially, waterspouts are tornadoes that form over water in advance of a severe thunderstorm thanks to a wind shift. The leading edge of cool air exhaust ahead of a storm will kind of kick up these little whirls. They become vertically tilted, stretched, and move erratically, sometimes onto land, and become tornadoes. So I had compiled a bunch of research and data and whatnot on this, a couple case studies, and I sent it to my local National Weather Service office as a little 14-year-old, 15-year-old, and they liked it. They were like, yeah, well, we'll make some tweaks to how we forecast and how we warn these events, which was great. So I went to Nashville, Tennessee to give a presentation on this. And it was so well received that I started going back to the AMS year and year and year. And I haven't really missed, actually, I missed 1 year during the pandemic, but it was great. But it put me in contact with so many great people. Around the same time, I started writing for this little teeny newspaper on Cape Cod called the Old Colony Memorial. And I didn't think anyone actually read my articles, but I was like, I'll put a weather article together each and every day. And I did for a little while, and then one day I got back from school, opened the newspaper, and there was a little thing that said, hats off to Matthew Cappucci. I was like, oh, okay. And there's this whole letter from some random guy who said how much he enjoyed the article, how much he learned from it, and he signed it, Eric J. Heller. I thought, okay, that's interesting. I found him online, sent him a nice thank you email, and that was that. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm trying to figure out where I want to go to college. There are not many places that will train you to become a broadcast meteorologist. Usually Penn State, University of Oklahoma, Linden State, Purdue, a couple others. Linden State, tiny school in Vermont with a 99.4% acceptance rate. Great school for broadcasting. Jim Cantori of the Weather Channel went there. But at 99.4%, didn't seem overly rigorous or competitive. It was great because it allowed access to so many people, but I wanted something that, if broadcast meteorology didn't work out, it would give me more of a competitive backup plan. Cornell looked to be that because Ivy League school, great academics, I could double major in other things too. But Cornell's pricey. They wanted $37,000 a year. I don't have that kind of money. And so I discovered that Ivy League schools will do the Walmart price match guarantee, and that they'll match the offer of any other Ivy League school. Now, Harvard has the best endowment of any school, so I figured I'll apply there on a whim, just for fun, see what happens. If I get in, I'll do some couponing with Cornell, and hopefully they'll knock the price down. So I never took the application to Harvard seriously at all. For example, I didn't write a supplemental essay. I just said, Google me if you want to learn more about me. I'd rather my accomplishments speak for themselves. I never knew that they did interviews. So one day, I'm tutoring. I used to homeschool kids in Spanish, Latin, math, and physics. And my flip phone, remember the one with the letter keys? My flip phone starts buzzing. I had no idea how to even put it on silent. So I was mortified that as I'm at this professional setting, trying to tutor, that my phone would go off. A number I didn't recognize. I assumed it was a telemarketer. So I ignore it. The kid, is kind of distracted because we're trying to learn Latin, because that's a very applicable life skill. And it buzzes again. And I'm glad a few folks laughed at that. And then it buzzed a third time. And finally, the fourth time, I was getting annoyed. So to make Thomas laugh, the kid who I was tutoring, I picked it up and I yelled, "Who are you? What do you want? Why do you keep calling me? And I don't want your damn solar panels. Leave me the hell alone." And I hung up. So about an hour later, I'm driving home. The phone rings again. Me being goody two-shoes little me, I didn't want to pick up the phone while I was driving, so I wound up pulling over, picked up the phone. I said, "What?" She said, "Yes, sir, this is Haley Shore from the Harvard University Admissions Department." I was like, shoot. So apparently, she wasn't a telemarketer. That was the actual interviewer from Harvard who wanted to drive down to Cape Cod and interview me the next day. And so she did. She came down to my eclectic little school. There's a fire drill in the middle of it, which was great. But we were laughing the whole time. I didn't take it remotely seriously. And she asked me my favorite author. And I said Lois Lowry, who wrote The Giver. Anyone ever read that? Great book. I love it. And she said, "You're kidding." I said, "No." She said, "Lois Lowry is a really good friend of mine." And we hit it off so much, and I wound up getting in. But that led to complications because Harvard only wanted $8,000 a year. Cornell was willing to match that, and then Linden was still going to be pricey. So the question was, what would I do? I went out to Cornell, realized it wasn't the school for me, so I was stuck between Linden, 99.4% acceptance rate, and pricey. Harvard, slightly lesser than 99.4% acceptance rate, decent school, no meteorology, no atmospheric sciences. So I decided to go there, and I wanted to create a special concentration or build my own major, which is done on average like once a year. It's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to do it. You have to fill out 40 pages worth of paperwork. You have to find an advisor. This usually takes kids 12 to 18 months, and about 90% are rejected. So I'm going into it knowing the odds are unlikely. I'll probably transfer out. I get there. I hate it. Everyone's so snooty. They're using words like apropos all the time and historic because they want to sound smart. Everyone has this, they're all fancy schmancy. And my favorite restaurant's Waffle House. I am not a fancy schmancy person. I wear the suit on TV because I have to, but anywho. So this first couple weeks of school, I discover I have a midterm exam in physics. And it's about 3 or 4 weeks in. I'm convinced Harvard's not the place for me. They made a mistake. I'm not smart enough to be there. And it is in this place called the Jefferson Laboratories, which is a labyrinthic building. It's only 2 or 3 floors, but somehow they have rooms named like 604 next to 203, below 411. I don't know how they numbered it, but needless to say, in looking for this midterm exam, which was scheduled to start at 10, I became lost, and hopelessly lost. So at 9:40 became 9:50, became 10 o'clock, and if you're more than 7 minutes late, you essentially forfeit the exam. So 10:10 rolls around, I realize I have no chance. 10:20, I give up, and I'm like, I must have failed my first midterm exam. That's that. Got to pack it up, go home. Wasn't cut out for Harvard. I didn't realize the exam had been canceled. No one told me that, which is why I couldn't find it. So I'm beside myself, tearing up. I'm wandering the hallway, I have my backpack on. I'm somewhere in this labyrinthic building, and I finally just put my backpack on the ground. I'm like, I'm done. I sat there, and no one was around. I curled up and teared up. And as I'm sitting there, a little nameplate catches my eye. It's one of the doors across the way, and it says Eric J. Heller. I thought, wait a second, that name sounds familiar. And I pulled up my Gmail from 4 or 5 years ago, and it turned out that the guy who wrote in for my little small town newspaper who read one of my articles, Eric J. Heller, happened to be an award-winning physicist at Harvard and one of the most decorated professors there. So I knocked on the door, introduced myself. He remembered me. I remembered him. And he asked me, how do you, because we talked about atmospheric science for probably an hour, and he asked me, how do you plan to do it here? He said, well, I'd like to do a special concentration, blah, 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 blah. Got to find an advisor. And he said, you just found one. And so with that, everything changed instantly. So we put together this 40-page application, and about a year later, it was approved. So I got the first ever atmospheric sciences undergraduate at Harvard, which meant I had to, it was great, but it was an uphill battle. It was like putting together puzzle pieces that are not meant to fit together. So I would take 7 classes per semester instead of just 4, while also working 40 hours a week to save for my future kids so they can go to college someday. I would go to MIT 3 days a week to take extra classes there, supplemental classes in the more specialized meteorology. I go to the grad school a couple days a week to take classes there because they didn't have enough undergrad. Some classes were just me in a room with a professor, one-on-one. Some classes were me storm chasing in Oklahoma. But that was one of the nice things because I had some outside scholarships that I could call in to let me go storm chasing. And it worked beautifully. So I got to go storm chasing every year. And that was by far, that's my happy place. I have 2 happy places. In front of the green screen and being pelted by like jumbo hail. Once it gets bigger than limes, it starts to hurt. So you got to go inside the car. But if you ever see pictures of me with my helmet on, that's why. And it was wonderful. And so I was super excited. But then I came to realize, when you're soon to graduate, you're 21 years old, you have acne, you have a few extra pounds, and you have no TV experience, nobody's going to hire you. I submitted to probably 30 different TV stations. The best offer I got was $31,000 for a 3-year contract in Monroe, Louisiana. Bakersfield, California offered $29,500. However, I had been writing for the Washington Post for about 2.5 years prior to that. Just freelancing, but I was doing articles every day. So I kept that in the back of my mind. So when I graduated, you have to keep in mind, it's Harvard, so everyone gets these fancy schmancy jobs. So all my friends in the front group, 2 were going for PhDs, 1 was joining the Peace Corps, 3 or 4 had these fancy jobs that paid like $200,000 doing tech, and I don't even know what they were doing. There were a lot of zeros and ones. There were folks everyone was getting these big fancy offer letters. They're going to consulting firms, and then there was me who, my best offer was $31,000 to work in a TV market in the middle of nowhere. And so it was extremely depressing to graduate and to have nothing going on. Right before I graduated, 2 days before, I went down to New York City to interview at a major hedge fund there because they needed meteorologists. And I had, so believe it or not, on Wall Street, actually, they have meteorologists, but they need to be really good at coding because essentially they want meteorologists to create models, weather models, that can predict weather and trends before the regular models can do it because they want to figure out what the consumers are going to do. So is it going to be a snowy winter? Well, they need to buy more petroleum, stuff like that. I can't code for my life. And so I had 5 interviews there, went super well. We were talking start dates and salary and all this stuff. And as they're leading me to the elevator, because remember, this is day before graduation, I'm set to fly out and go storm chasing, they casually ask, so we're wondering, are you as passionate about this as you are about TV and storm chasing? And I said, honestly, no, I'm definitely not. This is a job. But if you hire me to do a job, I'll do it, and I'll do it damn well. And you'll get your money's worth and then some. And he said, trust us. Don't give up. Something will happen down the road. And at the time, and with that, they rescinded the offer on the spot. And I was devastated because my last chance at a job evaporated right before my eyes. And all my friends had these fancy jobs, and I'm going out to Oklahoma. The money's almost run out. The scholarships are almost run out. This is my last chance to storm chase. And that's it. So I storm chased for a month, get some good tornadoes, and driving back to Cape Cod was the saddest 2 or 3 days of my life. I felt like a failure. I had this Harvard degree, and yet I had nothing I could do with it. No one would take me seriously when I applied for TV roles. And then the Washington Post called and said, hey, want to come down to DC and do what you do full time? We like your stuff. We'll add some video stuff for you. Make it happen. I said, all right, because that was the only offer I had. And I figured DC, I had the Metro card. They're $2 on it. We can make it work. So I came down here. I didn't know really anything about DC. The only place I'd heard about to live was Alexandria. So I was like, okay, I'll move to Alexandria. Got a place near the trains because I like looking at trains, and Metro was convenient too. Had to face west, so I got a 10th floor apartment facing west, and so I can watch the storms. And that's when hurricane season 2019 went bonkers between Dorian and all the other crazy storms. And it wound up that during big hurricanes or big events, people would contact the Washington Post looking for a meteorologist to appear on their TV channel, whether that be DW News in Germany or BBC News or whomever. And usually they would have Jason or Andrew do it, my two bosses at the time. There was one point when neither of them were available, so they kind of had me do it. And so I went to the BBC bureau here, did that once or twice, and it went so well that they stopped calling the Washington Post and they started texting me directly. And so then for every big storm in the future, it wouldn't be, hey, Washington Post, we need somebody. My phone would buzz and be like, hey, can you come on in 30 minutes? So between them, CTV in Canada, DW, Sky News Arabia, suddenly I was doing hits decently off. Maybe 3 or 4 minutes, but it got me that experience being in front of the camera. And during the pandemic, I would do it fully remotely from wherever I was. So I started cobbling together a demo reel. At the same time, when the pandemic hit, I could go storm chasing every year. So I did. I'd go out to Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas, whatever, bring my friends from D.C. who have no background in weather to go storm chasing. And again, I cobbled together more videos, would be posting these things, and at the same time, I'd be doing local NPR. And people seemed to take a liking to me with NPR. And I got so many nice comments that I started archiving them all. So in June of 2021, so last year, I saw an opening at Fox 5. And I mean, Fox 5 is a long shot because I have no TV experience, and yet Fox 5 is the 7th biggest TV market in the country out of 210. And everyone starts in one of the bottom markets. Usually takes about 15 to 20 years to get to a top 10 market, if that. But I applied, and I sent them my storm chasing demo reel, and I sent them a list of 1,000 compliments, which seems egoistic. But I said, look, I'm not going to speak for myself. Let the consumers, let the viewers, let the people I serve speak for me. And then when it came time for the cover letter, I said, watch my demo reel. If I can be on camera and do a good job while being pelted by hail the size of softballs or inside a tornado, I'm pretty sure I can do it in front of a green screen. And I said, all right, come do it. And it worked out so well because my first day on air, I was petrified. But because, you're walking in front of a live TV camera in front of, this was real TV. This was not just me appearing in Germany, way across the world. My own bosses and everyone who I knew was watching. And so I was petrified. However, I've been joking for weeks that on day one, there would have to be tornadoes. The universe would give me something. Lo and behold, day one, tornado hits downtown D.C. You might remember that EF1 last year on July 1st. And so I happened to be on air at the time, and it was great because there was no like, hey, this is our new meteorologist. He's 23. He still eats out the kids' menu. Instead, it was, Matthew, go do your thing. So I went over, rolled up the sleeves, and started broadcasting. And it was wonderful because in that instant, folks learned that, hey, he knows his stuff. But when you look as young as I do, and you're trying to figure out how to become trusted by the most educated TV market in the country, one of the biggest TV markets in the country, I was like, how can I do this? So I figured I'd adapt a Doogie Howser persona, in that the only way to win people over would be to flex what I know. So I'll go on air, I'll throw out these crazy terms, but we'll make it soft serve, we'll explain it. For example, this morning, on the news, I talked about a lee trough and how a lee trough could cause 1 or 2 showers today. Now, a lee trough means nothing to anyone other than you because I know you know weather pretty well. But for everyone else, lee trough means nothing. But it's a strip of low pressure east of the Appalachians, just a broad, diffuse area of low pressure. Low pressure fosters gathering of air, convergence that bumps into each other, and then suddenly have air go upwards into a couple little pockets of storms. And suddenly, now y'all know what a lee trough is. And there's a way to do it. No other TV meteorologist in the country even bothers to do it. But I figured if I try, A, it could become my thing. B, I really want to educate the audience. And C, it would win me over. And it did. Fast forward to September 1st. This was a day where days in advance, I've been telling folks at my station, there will be tornadoes this day. It's going to be tornado day. I'm the tornado guy. No one else at Fox 5 had really ever seen a tornado. I mean, they'd covered them before. They knew their stuff, but I'm very intimate with tornadoes. Like, I get up close and personal. I've been inside a tornado before. I know naders. And so I had been badgering my boss days in advance, like, hey, can I work Wednesday? There are going to be tornadoes. Can I work Wednesday? The night before. Can I work tomorrow? Because I was slated to go in for a promo shoot. Essentially, you stand there, they take your pictures and whatnot, they put you in the commercials, all that stuff. And I think it's the picture I have in my key card, which doesn't look like me, but oh well. And so I was slated to go and do that, but then they were kind of boot me out after because all the other meteorologists were there for promos. They didn't need an extra 7th person. So while I was there, I badgered one of my bosses again. I was like, please let me stay. And he said, no, we're overstaffed. I said, fine, I'll do it myself. And so after my promo shoot, I ran out of the studio. And remember, I had my makeup on and was dressed all fancy schmancy. I'm running down Wisconsin Avenue, literally shedding my suit, replacing with a T-shirt, sprinting down the road. My shoelaces are flailing wildly about. And I'm convinced that there's going to be something towards the bay, towards Annapolis. And so I drive as quickly as I can towards Annapolis. And wouldn't you know it, I found an EF2 tornado. And that's never happened to anyone on the East Coast as a TV meteorologist. So I do the natural thing. I pull over. I pull my iPhone. I'm like, hi, guys, the meteorologist, Matt Cappucci. Here's the tornado crossing the road. And suddenly that blew up. And my boss was like, damn, he did it. And then I got the full-time offer. And then everything kind of happened from there. Then I got the book deal. Then I got, my radar in App in Florida, and everyone else wanted to do things. And now Fox National's interested. And it's been amazing to think that DC holds this many opportunities. So many folks have taken chances on me at all my companies because I am by no means a typical applicant. I don't do things a typical way. They give me, especially at Fox 5, they give me unbelievable creative freedom. At all my jobs, I have the best bosses in the whole world, but I also get to work for the best people in the whole world. DC is filled with some of the nicest, best, smartest, just most quality, genuine people. And, I mean, you guys are a testament to that. The fact that people showed up today, I'm still shocked people like me. And sometimes I love it. It doesn't happen often, but once in a great while I'll be recognized in public when I have friends. I'm like, see? I'm popular. It's the best. So if ever y'all see me out with friends, do that. But no, in any case, I hope y'all know how much I appreciate you coming out. So I assume I'm supposed to read a couple different passages here. I have one that's not as serious, and then I have one that chronicles the Annapolis tornado. We can do a quick run through of those. Fair warning, I'm much better at ad-libbing than I am at actually reading because I never use a teleprompter, and it moves so fast. So we'll see how this goes. I assume no one's read the book yet. You just got it an hour ago? No one's a speed reader? I discovered there are like 20 typos in there, so my apologies. Yeah, I wasn't happy about it either. Right? It's not as bad as in high school. So I was not in yearbook club. I'll tell you this story briefly. But my school's mascot was the Sturgis Storm. The school's called Sturgis, and for whatever reason, the storm was their mascot, little lightning bolts and stuff, which worked out well for me because they had a contest my senior year to see who could design the best cover for the school yearbook. And whoever did, I wasn't in yearbook club, but whoever won the contest would get a free copy of the yearbook and their design would be everywhere. I was like, okay, that sounds fun. So I took a picture of mine of lightning over Cape Cod Bay, overlaid it with Sturgis Charter Public School, class of 2015, put the International Baccalaureate logo, the Sturgis logo, all that stuff. This was like November of my senior year. I sent it to them. They said, we love it. We'll make it the cover. You win. Yay. I was like, okay. So I think nothing of it. April rolls around. Suddenly, we're all taking exams, and because we were in sort of an underfunded school, we had to take exams actually at a church across the street because we didn't have space to take exams. And so I got back from the church that day, and there's a small crowd waiting for me at the front of the school. Apparently, they've been distributing yearbooks, and they said, Cappucci, best senior prank ever. I said, what are you talking about? They said, oh, we know you did it on purpose. Classic you. I'm like, what? They said, the yearbook, the typo. I said, what typo? I had not written Sturgis Charter Public School. I had written Sturgis Charter Pubic School. And 400 copies of the yearbook later, everybody has a copy. It meant I didn't get to do my valedictorian speech. So that's why I have to win an Emmy Award someday so I can give an actual speech and stick it to the principal. But Needless to say, I still make typos. None as egregious as that. So without further ado, this is Roadside Attractions. This is a very small chapter right after my start of storm chasing. If you're a storm chaser, odds are you're accustomed to putting some serious mileage on your car. I quickly learned that a single week in May might feature visits to Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Storm systems move, and that means I do too. Most days feature 300 miles or more of driving. I've crisscrossed just about every paved highway in the Great Plains. I know where every speed trap is. Well, almost every speed trap. Where to find the most scenic picnic spots, and which gas stations have microwave ovens. I always know how many miles it is to the next town with a Chili's, and I'm never more than an hour away from one of my dozen or so secret stargazing spots. By day, 8-hour drives can become long and monotonous, especially when I'm alone. If America the Beautiful was written proportionally, the amber waves of grain would take up about 3 verses. They're endless. Playing a one-man game of I Spy isn't overly entertaining either when all there is to see are crops and silos, and the 46-song playlist on my green iPod Shuffle loops every 3 hours. Streaming signals don't work very well on the prairie either. My favorite road trip pastime, however, stems from the roadside billboards. Most advertisements in the Great Plains aren't for Coca-Cola or McDonald's. They're for casinos, gun shows, XXX video stores, bail bondsmen, farm equipment, the highest payout bingo game, and deep-fried pies. Those always spark a chuckle, but some billboards have a more threatening aura. Will you burn? Read one I passed in 2018. Fiery red text superimposed atop sinister crimson flames. Hell is forever, screamed another. Others are even more ominous. God is watching. Is he pleased? The Bible Belt is full of scary warnings along the side of the highway. Some are bluntly specific, listing all the things they caution will get you a free pass to hell. Drinking in excess? Yep. Gluttony? Mm-hmm. I always roll my eyes when I see that one, as I'm usually busy plotting my next meal. Sexual immorality? The billboards warn against that too. Frankly, hell doesn't sound like that bad of a time. Besides, you have to climb stairs to get to heaven, but there's a highway to hell. I wonder if that highway has billboards too. Once in a while, I pass a special billboard. Searching for God? Call now, it reads. A bold-faced 1-800 number emblazoned against a blue sky stock photo. Those are my favorite. I always call on the off chance that God picks up that day. I'm sorry to say he hasn't yet. There are some places too remote even for billboards, however. Those are my favorite. With nothing in sight save for distant rock formations or the blades of a far-off wind turbine, there's nothing standing in the way of a sunset as vibrant as it is pure. The landscape of the Great Plains, while at first glance mundane, teems with beauty. Every rolling crest and dip of the prairie is part of a soothing rhythm, the drive akin to the gentle swaying of a ship at sea. The only difference? I'm not steering my ship into safe harbor like most captains. I'm out in pursuit of the storm. That's a brief little chapter. You can see I wove a bit of humor in there. But let's fast forward to the Annapolis tornado day, because this was when I was at Fox 5, and I'll skip sort of the first part. Spoiler alert, I become a meteorologist. And I talk about my first time on air, but I think this will sort of, this takes you to that day of the Annapolis tornado. Wednesday morning came early, at 2 o'clock a.m. to be exact. Is it the 4th of July? I groggily wondered. Non-stop lightning was leaping outside my window with a pair of rotating supercell thunderstorms riding a warm front into the Washington D.C. metro. That looks borderline tornadic, I thought incredulously, while looking at the radar in the dead of night. But both storms remained under wraps. If supercells were firing at 2 a.m., I shuddered to think what 2 p.m. would bring. I was up at 6:30 a.m. writing for the Washington Post, authoring 2 quick articles, including one about Washington's afternoon tornado threat. I felt like a Great Plains forecaster on one of those days. I had awoken tired, and I knew an 18 or 20-hour day stood ahead of me. You know you love this, my mind seemed to say. The other piece I wrote was about the propensity for crippling flooding rainfall in the Northeast. Hurricane Ida's moisture would pool along a cold front, which would wring the humidity out of the air as if from a waterlogged washcloth. The cold front, the same that would spark severe weather, was parked parallel to Interstate 95. That's never something you want to see. After both articles and a few radio hits, I ironed my suit while doing a Twitter space with my radar reviewing the high-impact forecast. Midway through, I received a message from the office of the Montgomery County School District Superintendent. They were deciding whether or not to release students early ahead of the afternoon tornado threat. I offered my recommendation and applauded their forethought. I was still reviewing weather maps and conducting my mesoanalysis as I hopped into the shower. I arrived at Fox 5 around 12:30 p.m., an hour and a half before my promo shoot. I had a feeling I'd be needed early. The sun was shining through patches of low-level cloud cover. It was already warm and humid, and the presence of sunshine was about to help some kernels of major instability to pop. Tucker and Mike, who watches Fox 5? Anyone know Tucker and Mike? Okay, Tucker's the fun, crazy uncle, and Mike is the super nerdy one who's like an older version of me. Tucker and Mike were on air with the day's first tornado warning by the time I got inside. It was 80 miles south of Washington, D.C., on the southern flank of our viewing area, but it was a sign of things to come. I knotted my tie, painted on a layer of makeup, and casually strolled by Kyle's office. "Any chance y'all need an extra hand?" I said, smiling. "We have too many Mets here as it is," he said, reiterating the point he'd made via email. I frowned and nodded. I knew it wasn't personal, but I felt like an athlete who had just been benched. "I'm the tornado guy," I grumbled inaudibly. My shoulders slumped as I walked into the green room to see if I could have my picture taken early. "You know if Caitlin's coming?" the photographer asked. "It's her turn." He was sitting in a chair, thumbing through photos he had taken of the other on-air talent. "She's in the studio with a tornado warning," I said. "Mind if I take her slot for now?" I sauntered past metal stands suspending umbrellas, reflective padding, and external flashes before posing in front of a white background. 20 minutes later, I was sprinting out the door, clutching a bent metal coat hanger and a balled-up white button-down shirt. Half-removed makeup was smeared across my face. The untied shoelaces on my tattered sneakers were flying unrestrained. "You guys want some chasing today?" I texted to my radar's lead meteorologist, hopscotching across the street between cars. I didn't have time to wait. "Sure," came the response. My radar was willing to match my hourly rate from Fox 5. I was determined to do tornado coverage for someone. I had a strange feeling that I'd be needed before long. I opened the My Radar app on my phone and flicked through a surface map as I skipped down a flight of stairs into the parking garage. I've got to get to Anne Arundel County, I thought. Temperatures were a degree or two warmer east of Washington, and a batch of rotating storms was in the process of blossoming to my south. The warm waters of the Chesapeake Bay would also boost tornado chances. The air would be more unstable, and the cloud bases would be lower. It was now 1:30 p.m. and skies had clouded over. Sheets of rain were pouring down in 2-minute intervals as I poked through gusty squall lines en route to the Beltway. My phone rang as I weaved between lanes, convinced I'd choose the fastest one. It didn't work. Washington drivers are not overly equipped to handle torrential downpours, or anything for that matter. "Hey, Matt, it's Gwen." Gwen was a weekend morning meteorologist who had coached me with the same dedication a parent would their own child. She was strict, patient, exacting, and above all, kind. I hadn't seen her since my first day of work. "Hey, Gwen, what's up?" I asked cheerfully. I was fully in tornado mode, but I was eager to catch up with her. "Are you at the station?" she asked. "I'm supposed to be heading to where there might be damage later. Any thoughts?" I advised her to head towards Bowie and be prepared to move. As my urge to blast east increased, the traffic in front of me seemed to slow down even more. At last, I made it onto Route 50 and was racing towards Annapolis. The sky was a grayish yellow. Radar now showed an area of intense, albeit diffuse rotation, about 15 miles to my south-southeast. I wanted to get east of it in case it further intensified. Tropical tornadoes are notoriously difficult to chase. They're usually wrapped in rain and only touch down briefly, cloaked from view until it's too late to hide. Their circulations are shallow and tough to spot on radar. Unlike with traditional supercells, I couldn't approach from the south or from the rear. I had to get ahead of it. The area of rotation began to tighten 10 miles to my south. It would be close. If I didn't get off the highway soon, I'd end up on the roadway with a mesocyclone bearing down on me. The cars in front of me had slowed to a crawl. We are now in heavy rain streaming northeast of the circulation. I was 3 miles away from my exit at 2:10 p.m. when the rain suddenly stopped. Above me was a jet black cloud that seemed to wrap to my south in a big arcing curve. I passed a clearing on the right and turned my head. A column of darkness connected the cloud to the ground. I frantically dialed Gwen. There was no time for me to question the absurdity of what I'd seen. "Cone tornado near Annapolis," I said, out of breath. "It's on the ground." I hung up abruptly and turned off the exit. 3 minutes after, I had made my way to Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. Should I run up the bleachers, I thought? The tornado was a couple miles to my west, but I couldn't see its snout below the tree line. Instead, the rugged, cylindrical wall cloud appeared like an amorphous cylinder gyrating along over forests. I parked and leapt atop my truck's roof for a better view, texting Mike and Tucker, "Tornado on the ground," before filming a Twitter video for my radar. "I can tell you that very well may be it," I shouted at my iPhone, adopting an uncharacteristically grave tone. "Edgewater, circulation's over you right now. Everybody in Annapolis needs to be in their shelters right now. Likely tornado in Annapolis," I typed. An eternal minute passed as I contemplated my next move. I was witnessing a historic event and had to get the best vantage point I could. Without a strong knowledge of the area, I decided to race northwest again on Roe Boulevard towards the highway. I cursed at the traffic lights, obstinately impeding my progress. A mother and her young son obliviously entered an orthodontics office to my right. Do they not know what's going on, I thought? I passed a church on the left and a globe-like water tower. Coupled with the jade-colored leaves whimpering in the wind, the scene was reminiscent of my jaunts through Mississippi and Alabama. An ornate brick sidewalk flanked the roadway. I was in the passing lane. My eyes fixated on the cement road in front of me as I approached the opulent artisan-constructed bridge over Weems Creek. The sailboats to my right were still, refusing to acknowledge the weak breeze. To my left, a gray pillar of roiling smoke was churning up vegetation. Wait a second, I thought. I turned left, not believing what I was seeing. It was a tornado, and I was barely 800 feet away from it. It was paralleling me in the roadway. I grabbed my iPhone and began filming out the window, screaming, "Tornado in Annapolis, Maryland!" It was exactly what I had predicted, and the last thing I had expected. There was only time for split-second decisions. Should I keep going? Stop? Pull over? The tornado was about to cross the road in front of me. A thicket of trees was present to my left, and there was no breakdown lane or shoulder to pull off of. I accelerated before braking in a vacant turn lane, coming to a stop and swiftly exiting the vehicle. Stop! I screamed at cars unwittingly driving into the circulation. A swarm of leaves was floating out of the air like a morbid snowfall, complete with pieces of shrapnel and tufts of insulation. It was a supernatural beauty, the spectacle a treaty of harmony transfiguring the storm's annihilative appendage. Shreds of vegetation were gliding through the air like feathers, twinkling as they swiped through fissures of sunlight that were pouring through cracks in the threatening sky. The atmosphere was trying to seduce me closer. A sharp mist swallowed the road 200 feet to my northwest, where clumps of foggy condensate were rapidly wafting up into the sky. A garden hose of rain sprayed me as the rear-flank downdraft wrapped southeast with a blast of cool air. Brake lights shone beneath the green exit sign marking Route 50. It was 2:23 p.m. The tornado appeared to be lifting. I checked for oncoming traffic, slipped into my vehicle, and prepared to drive again. "Tornado in Annapolis!" I tweeted, tagging my radar. Concentrating on my rapid breathing once more, I chuckled. Only me, I thought. An hour later, I had been wearing a suit and tie in a cozy TV studio. Now I was covered in torn-up pieces of leaves, drenched in water and sweat, and was sliding around in a soaked car seat. This is my natural habitat, I thought. I didn't have a plastered-on smile or the stock persona of a typical on-camera newscaster. I was a weather nerd who was right where he was supposed to be. I needed a towel and a good shower. So in the rest of that chapter, Fox 5 calls. They need me to do broadcasting. I do. You'll read the rest of it, and then I get some good news towards the end of the chapter. So I think at this point, structurally, and correct me if I'm wrong, we open up for questions? Awesome. So please ask as many questions. Oh, thank you. Well, y'all are very kind. Ask as many questions as you possibly can.
Please step to the microphone by the pillar to ask for questions so everybody can hear.
Oh, also first, I have to get a selfie with y'all. Smile. Beautiful.
Be sure to tag us.
Yes, definitely. All right, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, compliments, critiques, or criticisms. Come on down.
Well, I'd like to ask about climate change.
Sure.
Do you think that there's any possibility of slowing it down?
Not in our lifetimes. I think one of the issues that the media... Oh, sorry?
What was the question?
Oh, the question. Yes, I should repeat that in the microphone. So the question, is there any chance of slowing down climate change? I don't believe in our lifetimes. Because the atmosphere is sort of like a train for multiple reasons. Number one, even if we stop emitting greenhouse gases right now, we have something called ocean outgassing. Essentially, there's an exchange of gases between the ocean and the atmosphere constantly ongoing, and so even if the atmosphere has less in it all of a sudden, the ocean is still putting out some every single day, and so we will continue seeing warming, albeit at a less accelerated pace in the future. The other thing, too, is that the atmosphere has what are called positive feedback mechanisms, meaning if we nudge Earth out of a stable state in a slightly different direction, it'll accelerate in that direction. Picture balancing on the top of a mountain. If you nudge yourself in one direction or the other, suddenly you accelerate down the hill in whichever way you first gave that initial perturbation. Same thing in the atmosphere. So, for example, if we start melting the polar ice caps, which we've done, thanks to human-induced climate change and warming, suddenly there's less white reflective stuff to push solar rays back out to space, meaning we're getting more in the way of sunshine, heating the atmosphere even more. Or, for example, what's the biggest greenhouse gas?
Methane. No?
That's the most effective greenhouse gas, but what's the most abundant greenhouse gas? Not quite carbon. Water vapor. So, as the atmosphere warms, it can hold more water. For every degree Fahrenheit the air temperature warms, the air can hold about 4% more water. We call that the Clausius-Clapeyron relationship. And suddenly, as we've warmed a little bit, we start boosting the amount of water vapor in the air, which traps heat even more effectively. For example, if we have overnight cloud cover, it's tough to radiate heat outwards into space. And so we're kind of still accelerating thanks to those positive feedback mechanisms. So I don't see any chance of slowing down climate change. I think the media does a horrible job communicating climate change. Either they put two people in a room, one who believes in climate change and one who denies science altogether, and they have them bicker back and forth, which is idiotic. It's like having someone say, I believe in yogurt, and another person saying, I don't believe yogurt exists, and putting yogurt in front of them and having them hash it out on TV. It's asinine. Or they go with the scare tactics, and there are many pro-climate change lobbying groups out there who will post countdown clocks, which is equally moronic because there's no precipice we're going to fall off. It's a slippery slope. And so I'm not happy with how most folks communicate climate science in general. If you tune into my forecast and stuff, you'll see I do it in a different way. But yeah, we're not going to slow down anytime soon. Sorry. More questions?
I'm walking to the microphone.
Yes.
This is not scientific, but I am not in the habit of watching Fox 5 News, but I would like to watch you. And so when can we see you on Fox 5?
Well, you're very sweet. I have an unusual gig in that they offered me full-time, and I said no to full-time because full-time would require an exclusive contract, and I love traveling, and I can't travel in 3 weeks a year, and I love doing a bit of everything. So my boss, best boss in the whole world, gave me a contract where essentially I can work any shifts they need me to, and they need me all the time. So like this is my 6th day in a row. I have a break tomorrow, and so I'm all over the place. So for this week, I will be on Friday morning from 4 to 11, Saturday from 7 to 9 in the morning, Sunday from... Actually, no, I'm sorry. Saturday, Sunday, I'm doing the evening shows. Same thing on Monday, and then I get back to mornings. So usually I tweet when I'll be on, and you can follow me on Twitter for that.
And for people who don't tweet, I know you have an Instagram, right?
I do. I
You
can
put it on Instagram?
So I posted on my Instagram story. I can be more generous in sort of how I post when I'll be on. I'll try to post my schedule more.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Definitely. I will say for folks who don't tune into Fox 5, we are very different from the national network. I can't say anything more than that, but we're very different from the national network. Yes.
What's your genesis for addressing the NPR WAMU folks as our gang? And then there's a second one too.
Oh, sure. So many folks have asked that question. NPR, they do great stuff, great journalism. However, during the pandemic in particular, people need human connection. People need human connection all the time. And I wanted to do something that would make the world feel like a slightly smaller place, make DC feel a little bit more familiar, like a big neighborhood. And I do that in all my forecasts. But I was trying to think of a way to be informal, to be chipper, and to just completely deviate from NPR style, because they're great. I love them, but they're not warm and fuzzy. And during a pandemic, people need that human connection. Everyone does. And so I thought, Capital Weather Gang, screw it. I'll just say Well Gang, because back in high school, I had a teacher, Mr. Karspeck, who would walk in every day and say, hey, gang, good to see you. And that's how we'd start class. And it was so informal, and it made him so much more accessible. And that's my biggest goal. I want to be accessible no matter what. Because, and like, there are still people at Fox 5, like anchors, who I adore, but I get nervous around because some are very down to earth. And most of them, I got to say, Fox 5, everyone's pretty down to earth. But some I still get intimidated by. And I never want to come across as that. I'm just a geeky kid who likes weather and who happens to walk in front of a TV camera every day or whatnot. And so if I can be informal and add some personality, that's the goal. And what's your second question?
It might be explained in your book, so it might be a spoiler here. But have you ever been in a storm chasing situation where you felt like you were over your head in terms of being something very dangerous?
So on a couple times, because if you roll the dice every day, there are going to be times when you get numbers that a little bit sketchy. I never take unnecessary risks, and I chase differently if it's just me versus if I have someone else. If it's just me, I can gamble because I know what I'm getting into, and hopefully I wind up right side up. But no, I do approach things very scientifically. There were two instances. One was a QLCS, or a quasi-linear convective system. And I know you know what that means. You want to explain for everyone? Louder!
So if you think of a squall line, which is basically a giant line of thunderstorms, a QCLS
Yep.
is basically that, but split or like multiple, but they're still going in that line.
Exactly. So as a result, you have individual segments of a squall line with embedded kinks of rotation within them, any of which can erratically spin up into a tornado. But the issue is they're so fleeting, so erratic, that you can't really predict which ones will kind of blossom in advance. And so there was a QLCS that I wound up kind of being in front of back on May 20th, 2021 in Bowie, Texas. Ironically, I got a tornado in Bowie, Maryland and Bowie, Texas, which, just that talented. So I'd been storm chasing all day, supercell, so low and discrete, isolated, rotating thunderstorms. They all eventually merge, and normally when they merge into a squall line, the threat transitions to damaging straight line winds and rain. I was like, okay, done for the day. I'd driven however far. I want to get to Gainesville, Texas to sleep for the night. And so I was driving east, and in that part of Texas, about 2 hours northwest of Dallas, you have very poor radar coverage. The beam goes out like this at a slight angle, and so the farther you are from the radar, as the Earth curves away and the beam goes higher, you see higher into the clouds, but you don't see near the ground. So we didn't really know what was going on near the surface. I knew there was a squall line coming in, but it was a QLCS that had multiple kinks of rotation in it. Suddenly my phone buzzes with a tornado warning. I'm like, oh, that's odd. And then another. And then another. So there were 3 individual circulations within this QLCS wrapped up into a wall of 80-mile-per-hour winds. The only town nearby was Bowie. I could be on the main north to south road, but here's the thing. On the west side of that, and I need to go north, on the west side there were power poles that I knew would topple in the straight-line winds. So I was in Bowie, and I figured, no, I'll take my chance with one of the circulations. Odds are it won't be anything too bad. Probably won't touch down. And so I'm in Bowie. And, yeah, the sirens are going off, and power is flickering, and suddenly the sirens just stop, and the power goes out. And I have no radar coverage because I can't see anything because it's middle of Texas. And it was the weirdest thing because the rain stopped, and I was like, okay, the storm must be done. What I had failed to consider was that the storm was so sheared, so much leaning, that that was sort of a sign that I was in the updraft region where the air is going upwards. So I start driving northbound. I'm like, okay, I can continue with my journey. The worst is probably past. But the power's still out. And suddenly I start seeing these flashes from down the way, but not lightning flashes, power flashes. So there was some sort of big wind nearby messing with transformers or messing with something about a mile up. I'm like, that's not good. And then with that, the rain came harder than I've ever seen before. And I've seen a lot of rain, believe me. I've lost 3 windshields in giant hail. And then leaves started hitting my windshield. But the leaves weren't coming from sideways. The leaves were coming from up. And so were small branches. What goes up must go down, so something had to suck all the leaves up. And then fog hit like this. And you don't normally get fog in that region of the thunderstorm, but what happened, I knew there had to be an immense area of very low pressure nearby, i.e. a vortex, to convert the water vapor in the air to condensate by lowering the air pressure. And suddenly, winds hit like this. And they gusted to about 100 miles per hour. Debris was kind of flying by, and I was like, okay, well, in the tornado. And it was funny because I had my camera on the whole time, and I was narrating. I'm like, well, gang, we're in the tornado right now. Debris is flying by. I figured it'd be great for my demo reel. So I did my best to, and I was only going about 4 miles an hour because I couldn't see anything. And it's nighttime, too, which is kind of scary. So I turned right into a parking lot, and I saw that they had a retaining wall. The winds were coming out of the north. So I very quickly, when there was a brief lull of wind, charged out the wind because I couldn't even get out. I was trying to push the door open, wouldn't work. Managed to get out the door, and then I went and I crouched down and protected my head with my hands next to the retaining wall and just kind of sat there like this for about 40 seconds. Let the freight train roar go by, and then I was like, well, time to go to Gainesville. So there was that. Another time there was an evil storm in Alabama. Anyone ever been to Alabama? I imagine a lot of folks probably have. Only a couple? Okay. Anyone been to New Hampshire or Maine? Alabama, terrain-wise, is like New Hampshire or Maine. You cannot storm chase in Alabama. You should not storm chase in Alabama. So naturally, I storm chased in Alabama. And I knew there was a mile-wide wedge tornado that was wrapped in rain unless I was very close to it. It was moving so quickly over these rolling hills, and I had to be south of it if I wanted to see it, or very close to it. And I knew I was about a mile away, and I'd calculated in my head, I'd have 3 minutes to get south of it. The speed limit was like 45, 50 in this winding road. I could make it. I'd make it by about 30 seconds. As I'm driving south, I reach my point of no return. I go a little further, and I'm like, you know what? 30 seconds is not a good enough margin because I can't see a thing. Remember, it's fully rain wrapped until you get due south of it. If there's a tree down, if there's a pothole, if there's anything, if I slide off the road, this mile-wide, 175 mile per hour thing is going to send me to Oz. And so I was like, you know what? I'll just stop here. And I stopped on the road, and it was the weirdest thing. It went from an ordinary downpour to pitch black in about 15 seconds. The only thing I can compare it with is the solar eclipse. If anyone's seen a total solar eclipse, how abruptly night comes in. There's nothing else that mimics that. It was like the universe was in a dimmer and someone just went like this. Lasted 40 seconds. This silhouette crossed the road, and then it got bright again. And I drove a couple 100 yards south, and there was a forest that was missing. So I made the right choice. But it's like Kenny Rogers says, you got to know when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, and when to run.
But why did you get out of the car?
No, for that one, I was in the car.
I know it's the other story, but you got out of the car.
Right. So I knew the winds were coming out of the north. I was, sitting upright in my vehicle. If there was debris, if there was whatever, it could puncture the vehicle. But if I was near a retaining wall, because it was a hill, I was in the lee of a hill, there'd be a relative calm spot, and I'd have a better chance, unless the winds were to switch around, which I gathered they wouldn't. I'd have a better chance of avoiding any debris. There was some minor debris that hit my truck. It was only an EF1, so enough to take roofs off your house, but not too bad. So, I didn't tell my mother half these stories. She's learning a lot. She's learning a lot of new stuff about me in this book. Y'all are going to learn new stuff about me, so we'll see how that goes. Yes, good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Do you have a favorite storm chase?
So my favorite storm chases, and this will sound sort of mushy, but it's true. My favorite storm chases are those I can share with others. If I didn't have an audience, or if I didn't have friends to come with me, it would be very lonesome because I could just as easily be doing weather in an office. I could be doing weather on Wall Street. I could be doing weather anywhere else, all by myself, typing into a computer, and that would be that. But that's not what I'm passionate about. What I'm passionate about is sharing it with other people. You guys see, if you've seen me on Twitter, Facebook, Fox 5, what else do I do? Whammo, the book. I radiate passion. I love what I do, but I love sharing it with people. At the end of the day, when I retire, I'll become a teacher, some sort of science teacher, because I don't consider myself a TV personality or anything like that. I'm a teacher who happens to work on TV or who happens to broadcast and happens to do weather. And I just love that weather is a great vehicle to share that passion. Because, let's face it, Americans are not as well-versed in science as they should be. Think about this. If you're out to lunch with one of your friends, they bring the menu over, and your friend says, "Oh, I hate this. I don't do that whole reading thing. I just never was really good at reading." You'd say, "Huh?" Wouldn't be socially acceptable. But if you go to the supermarket and your friend can't make his or her own change, somehow we've allowed that to become socially acceptable. Or if people don't have a rudimentary understanding of how the world works. For example, the broomstick challenge a couple years ago. Remember when it was a social media hoax? Everyone said that the broomsticks were standing up due to special gravity. It frustrates me that scientific literacy in America is never prioritized, nor will it be anytime soon. And so I love that I have a platform to educate, because if I can get people to talk science for 30 seconds a day without realizing they're talking science, or to get them to look up, they'll understand a little bit more, and it's a vehicle to sort of jumpstart more. One more question.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No more questions.
Okay.
2 more questions.
No. I thought there was someone behind the pillar, but okay, we're good.
Oh, I see one back there. Yes. You can be the last one. We saved the best for last.
We want to know if you've ever been in a pool with Golden Girls or Water Warriors.
Hey! How are you? You guys came. How are you? I didn't recognize anyone behind the masks. Aw. I can't believe y'all came. So, aw. Okay, we have to film something for Fox 5 after this. See, normally in the morning I'm wearing my makeup. I'm blushing now. So for those who don't know, Fox 5, they're the most fun TV channel in the world. And they've discovered that I blush easily. And they love putting me into funny situations that's just a little bit outside my comfort zone, but it always makes TV magic. Like, I can be nerdy me on camera, but they've sent me out line dancing before. I'm like a scarecrow. I never went to my senior dance. I never went to the school prom, nothing like that. Actually, I did go to senior prom once. I don't think I ever told you guys about this. I was in Fort Myers, Florida, visiting my grandparents, and they brought me down to the clubhouse for the senior prom. I had 4 prom dates. It was wonderful. I was like prom king. I was so popular, and that was more my speed because I recognized every last song they had. Nowadays, I don't know half the songs the kids are playing. I don't think half them have words. I don't get it. So anyway, I did go to the senior prom. But anyway, Fox 5 has discovered that I love older folks, and the feeling seems to be mutual. And so they had me dance with the senior citizens once, which was so much fun. And another time, they had me go to the YMCA and take a swimming course with folks who are senior citizens. And the... Well, I can't say old folks because you guys are not old. On paper, you're senior citizens. Some of y'all are senior citizens, but really, I mean, you're not. But because here's the thing. I used to think I was decently young. They could swim circles around me. I was treading water. I sank like an anchor. And they're doing all these like water aerobics and stuff. And who was the one? Oh, Evelyn. Evelyn still scares me just a little bit. I mean, y'all are athletes. And there was this thing that they made us do with like these dumbbells, and everyone else could do it. And I just, for whatever reason, I just kept spinning in circles. And I wound up at the other end of the pool. So I haven't won my Emmy Award yet for tornado coverage, but I damn well am going to for my coverage of the Golden Girls. That was the best question I've ever got. See, I love DC. You guys are the best. Thank you.